ahead and get started with our first creator. And if he shows up in the chat, y'all just let me know so that we can make sure that if he is here, I can give him the attention, or they, I don't know if it's a girl or not, so I should say they. We can make sure that they receive the attention that they deserve, and we thank them so much for putting their comic up on the chopping block. So before we move forward, I always like to read the first 3 episodes to all of y'all live, which this one's gonna be really interesting. Okay, y'all give me 1 second. I'll be right back. Yes, Lily. Okie doke, sorry about that. So, we are going to read everything live, which is going to be super exciting. So, no, go back. We don't want spoilers yet. Okay, so we're going to end the show here, and we're going to pull up the... Can I maximize this? Yeah, that's what we want to see. So, this is Ravens and Monsters, and we're going to look at the first episode. Oh, hello! So excited to have you here. Everyone say hello to Josie in the chat. Alright, so it says the series contains adult themes and situations and is recommended for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Proceed to view content. So if you guys are a little bit squeamish or, you know, something along those lines, then, you know, go ahead and dip out. Otherwise, we're going to keep moving forward. Also, a little bit of a fun fact about me. I am not the strongest reader, so you're just going to have to bear with me. And there are a few words in here that I'm not sure what the pronunciation is, so there's also that. And I didn't have time to look them up beforehand to see how to pronounce them, so we're going to rely on Google to say them for us. All right, so let's get into episode 1. So here are the things that I really did like. And that summary thing was just something that I wanted to mention while things were going on. It wasn't like enough to have its own slide or anything, but I want to mention it just so that, you know, we all could pay attention to that going forward. Oh, Jess, you had a thought. So Jess said, I felt like I got what was happening, but I have a basic understanding of the lore. Like, I know what the Necrocomicon is and Elder Gods. Yeah! Oh, hello, Everlasting. So glad you could join. So, looking at the things that I thought was done really, really well, I love the concept overall. As Mitch mentioned earlier, basically having sort of like horror literature Avengers. I think that's so cool. Really, really, really love that. The tone of the whole story was good. Like, I felt like I was reading something scary, something in the horror genre. Like, every panel had like an eerie quality to it, and I love the expressions, how they were so well conveyed to the rest of the audience, and it really set the tone for what was happening. Like, there was never any sort of confusion to me as to what was going on with the tone of the story. Like, I knew it was always like this was something serious. It was not a lighthearted moment. Next, the story was super intellectual, which I liked. Like, personally for me, I like to learn what I'm reading. I do like to kind of, especially if something's real or something has a connection to history, like Lovecraft and Poe. I think like having those elements in your story, it's really cool to have connections to that to build people's understandings and people's appreciation for those literary giants. So I really like that. Horror is just not my genre. Like, I just don't get into it. So that's why I don't really read their stuff. which is weird because I like thrillers a lot. So horror is just a little too far for me. So I really like the intellectualness of the story. Now with that, I do have a question for you, Josie. Do you, like, who's your target audience for this story before we move forward? Like, I'm just curious if you thought about that, or if you are just kind of winging it and hoping it finds the target audience, or what your plans for it was. Let's see. I only know about the old gods from World of Warcraft. Oh, elder gods from World of Warcraft. I didn't really know that that game had lore, which is interesting. Hello, RMC Hat. RMC Hat. Hello, hello. So glad that you could join. Everyone say hello to RMC Hat. I feel like your name is one of those that, like, I want to say the full thing for. RMC Hat. So I'm just going to move forward, and I guess we can get back to that, Josie, if, oh, okay. So maybe for young adult, let's say about 16 to 20-ish. Okay, that's cool. So the reason I ask is because from what everybody keeps telling me is, like, Webtoons is for, has mostly a younger audience, and that it's mostly female, which I don't, and it's mostly into the romance genre. So with this story being a little more advanced and a little more heavy and has like some deep meanings, like I felt like I could have, in some episodes, I could have just had a whole discussion about certain topics that could have been like thesis papers and stuff. So I felt like the story is really rich in its intellectual side of things, and it leans heavily into that. So I don't know for you if you're trying to get like mass appeal from the Webtoon audience, if this story's, the way it's crafted, is going to appeal to the Webtoon audience based off of what I've been told and a little bit of research that I've done. Which there's nothing wrong with that. Like, if you're not trying to be super popular or super meta or whatever, then this is completely fine. Like, you can just keep chugging away at it. But if you do want it to gain a little more popularity, that would be something I would consider. Like, what are other people doing in your genre? Even the more sophisticated intellectual stories, that look at those that are popular on Webtoons and see how they're crafting their story and how they're getting that group of people to interact with it. All right, but other than that, I mean, I love the fact that it's intellectual, but I like to look things up. So let's move on to our first card, which exposition makes scenes clear. So there wasn't really any exposition to me for the story. Like, there was bits and pieces scattered throughout, but I felt like I really needed a very clear section that told me what was going on, which you don't have to do. However, I would say for the people that are on Webtoons, like that's why I would include it, and that's why I kind of asked you about genre too. Like, why is this story on Webtoons, and so why is it on Webtoons, and what is it offering to the Webtoon audience? Which it might not be offering anything to them. It could just be a really good story on there. But again, if you're trying to build up in popularity, I think some exposition would really help that story. And even if it's not popularity, I think it would help make things a little more clear. So the scene in itself is it's starting in the middle, like your story's starting in the middle of a scene to me. And I think there needs to be more exposition included when scenes are started that way. Because let's say we're going into this completely blind, like someone who has no idea who Lovecraft is, someone who has no idea who Poe is, and they're like, Howard, that name means nothing to them. So it's kind of like, decide how much information you want to give to your audience. Don't be afraid to give them a little bit more. Like, you could still leave everything extremely mysterious, extremely cloak and dagger sort of thing. But just make sure that the scene is clear to the audience. Like, you don't have to give them any extra information. Just tell them like what's going on in the scene so that they know. Exposition. So exposition is designed to convey information that provides insight into a character or advances the story. So we don't know who Howard is. Like, obviously he's Lovecraft, but we don't know who that is. So, and I'm talking about this from a perspective of a person who has no understanding of this at all. Hello, Suki. Everyone say hello to Suki in the chat. So I'm talking about someone who has no idea who these characters are. So when we're setting this up, it would be nice to have had like some sort of, you could have even used, what are they called? Exposition cards, kind of like where you're telling the audience exactly who the character is. It could have been something like just thrown up there randomly when Lovecraft is introduced or after his name is said or whatever you want to do. And you could have just been like, Lovecraft, master creator of something, literary something, just so that the audience knows what's going on. Or, and then even when What's-His-Face is introduced, you could have said like what type of god he is or what his purpose is for being there. Because there was a little bit of confusion to me as to why he needed why he even needed a conduit or whatever. Like, why did he need that girl? Why did he want Howard? Why did he like, he smacked Howard around and he smacked the girl. So I was just like, so he's even mean to his human sacrifice person. I don't know what you want to call them. Human conduit, human whatever his connection to her is. So it seemed kind of strange in a sense that he needed them for something when he was already summoned into their world. And so like, why were they running away from Howard? That wasn't clear, because he had him wrapped up in the point where he was basically crushing him, and then he just like unwraps him and he lets him leave. Like, why didn't he just kill him? That would have solved all of the problems. And so some exposition would have been nice there as to explain why he's not necessarily killing him, why he's leaving him to live. Like, I know you kind of touched on it, that it didn't matter if he lived or not, but it kind of didn't seem to make sense to me in a way. Like, she basically, like, it seemed to oppose the girls, what she wanted, because it seemed like she wanted homeboy dead. So I'm just like, what was going on? I needed a little bit more clarity for the scene, not for the plot, just for the scene. So our last point, the background information provided by exposition helps connect the reader to the emotional stakes of the narrative. So this is probably the most important reason why I think it needs more exposition. I could tell from the scene that what was happening was really important. But since I didn't understand why it was important, like, I didn't understand why that book was so important. I didn't understand why Lovecraft was important. I didn't necessarily understand why I kind of understood why the girl was important. So I didn't understand those things, and I think adding in just a little bit of the exposition, like even a random off sentence, would have really helped to make that scene blossom. And it would have been a really good scene with that added information. So this was just some additional information about exposition, and for me, I think it's one of the biggest traps that people fall into. They think that either like don't give too much exposition or they overgive exposition, and so exposition is vital to the story. Like, it's a brand new story. People are entering into this world brand new, and so if you want it to have mass appeal to people all across the planet, like people who love this genre, people who love those writers, and people who have no idea, it's really important to add in just enough exposition where it's not annoying the fan base that's already there, and it's helpful to the new fan base. So the other thing is just kind of elaborate on what we touched on earlier. It's essential background information, and it helps readers to understand specific scenes, answering questions like when, where, why. And this thing is happening in the story. So we kind of already touched on all of that. And Josie, if you have any questions as I'm going through the slides, just, you can ask them. You don't have to save them to the Q&A. So just go ahead and ask them, especially if we're on the topic already. So let's look at the next one. All right, so uncommon words, which is, again, this isn't necessarily a negative, but because of the information that I've seen about Webtoon or have been told, it skews younger. And so part of the reason why using particular wording or particular phrases, I think, can be kind of hard for new readers is because they don't know what they're signing up for yet. So let's look into these two. So this sentence even meant, now I need to look that are more common or that, you think people might have heard to help improve the scene. Now, a way that I thought that could help with this is your character is really intellectual, for example. You could have a super smart character who loves to use big words. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you watch any shows that have doctors on it or something, whenever they say something intellectual, sometimes they'll come back and give the common man language behind it so that the reader doesn't have to do any extra work, like opening up a dictionary or trying to figure out what it means. And even in real life, people will say things and then they'll come behind themselves and explain what it means in the common tongue. Now, I don't think you could have done that here because of the characters that you had, but if Lovecraft had an assistant or something like in Sherlock, where Sherlock has Watson, if Lovecraft had an assistant, the assistant could translate to the audience. He could be like, oh, and so basically you're saying we need to get out of here or something like that. Just to make it a little easier on your audience, because let me tell you, the audience people are lazy. I myself am even lazy, but it goes a little bit beyond that, like we touched on. Just because that, even if they do look it up, if they have to do that every episode, it's not necessarily going to be appealing to people and it's not going to help them to understand the story, which if they don't understand what's going on, that means they're going to drop it or they're going to think that it's not good, which just because the story is more intellectual doesn't mean that it's not good. Also, hello, Night Dub. Thank you for joining. So then we get into very long words. So now we kind of touched on this again, but there are certain words to me that for the common folk, you just don't use. And it's just because unless you're targeting a very specific audience, unless you really want to go for the really smart, the really intellectual people, it's not going to appeal to average readers. And if a reader thinks that your story is too hard to read, or if they think it makes them feel dumb, or it makes them feel that they're doing extra work, they're not going to read it. So with that, I mean, that's one of the ones where it's kind of take it or leave it. Leave it in the speech pattern that you have, which I like because I think the speech pattern works for the characters you introduce. But I do think that it can be a little off-putting for it's not mass appealing. So there's that. So Josie said, I guess I read too much Lovecraft tales. I'm actually writing his own way. Okay, I mean, that's completely fine. If you want to do that, that is completely okay. But the issue comes in, do you want the story to be more broadly appealing. So if you don't care about it having broad appeal and you're just enjoying writing the story similar to Lovecraft, then other people who like Lovecraft will be into that, which I think there's a really big fan base for that. So you just need to make sure to get your story in front of the right people. So you don't necessarily have to change it. You just need to make sure that it's getting seen by the right people. So you might want to join like a, what is it? What do they have? Like a Discord for Lovecraft fans, Lovecraft Tales, or like join a Reddit forum for Lovecraft Tales or something, a Facebook group, try and get on an Instagram or something, like anything that is involved in that world. So unless you just want to change it for Webtoons and make it more mass appealing, then go for it. But if you don't, then keep it the way it is. Again, I don't have any experience with Lovecraft. I've never read it. I have read Edgar Allan Poe, but I'm also not a person who's into horror. And like the main things that I read right now are YA trash. So 3/4 of the time what I'm reading is probably for like a 14, 15-year-old. And it's not anything super deep. Like, I can make it deep, but was it intended to be deep? No. Like, could we read Twilight and make it really deep and philosophical? Probably, but was it made to be that way? No, it wasn't. Like, and the fan base is not out there trying to make it deep and philosophical. So, like I said, do you only change it if you're trying to get more appeal or something like that? So you said, right now I'm working on Poe's way of writing since the next chaps will be his. Yeah, I actually read more of what you said, and I wish we could have gotten into a little bit more of your story, or at least read the next episode, just because we would have gotten a nice little conclusion. But now I think this gives everybody a reason to go and read the next episode. Sorry, taking a drink of water. All right, so moving on. A lack of connection. And so this is really, really, really broad. So when I say that there's a lack of connection, I don't necessarily mean that you did anything wrong. This is just straight my opinion. Like, I didn't have anything to base this necessarily on. This was just my feelings. So back to what I was talking about initially with the summary. When I read the first 3 episodes, I had no clue what was going on, and I couldn't necessarily connect to the story because the whole time I'm thinking, what happened? What did I just read? And so when normally for me, if I read a story and it doesn't make sense, I don't come back to it. So I didn't connect to the plot as to what was happening. Like, I understood bits and pieces. So I understood that there was this creature that was all powerful, it seemed, and that he had made a deal with the female character, that the male character had scorned her for some reason, and that they were getting ready to leave to go create mass chaos. So I understood all of that to an extent, but I didn't understand specific points as to like, why is this important? So like the scene for me didn't connect because I didn't know why it was important. Like, why did Lovecraft necessarily care to an extent? And I know that sounds bad because like they were talking about basically eradicating the world. But from the character standpoint, like, why does he care? Is he a righteous character? Is he... Oh, now I'm getting into the characters. But basically, before I jump into the characters, it just didn't jive with me why it was important. I was just like, okay, the world's going to end, okay? Oh, sure it is. Monster. So now we get into the characters. I didn't necessarily, and I got that this was all under a mystery sort of thing. And again, I know it's hard to convey all of the information you need to within a number of limited panels, but I wasn't connecting with any of the characters. Like, I didn't have any necessarily emotional investment in any character. Even the the elder god, which I loved him. Clearly, you could tell by the way I was reading. Loved him, but yeah, I still didn't connect with him as a character. And I think that's on purpose because, you know, he is a extraterrestrial being. And I didn't really even jive with the girl because I didn't necessarily see what was going on with her until episode 3. And I was just kind of like, eh. Like, I get that you're upset about this, but you want to destroy the world for this. I didn't connect with that. I was like, okay, so someone died. I don't understand. Like, because I didn't understand how important he necessarily was, or I didn't understand the connection of the importance to her. So it had no bearing on why it was important to me. So, because I'm assuming that she's the villain of the story, and like, I'm getting a phone call from Poe, y'all. I'm gonna decline that. What was I saying? Hey, Tay Tay. Everybody say hey, hey. Hey, hey. To Tay Tay in the chat. Yeah, Elias, what's your question, please? And so just go ahead and ask. We're all excited to have you here, Tay. So it wasn't necessarily a lack of connection from the writing perspective, it's a lack of connection from the audience perspective. And so then we get to the hook part. So at the end, which I don't have it in my notes. Oh no, I feel so bad. And I can't remember what the hook was. Let me see if I wrote it down real quick. So what happened in episode 3? I can't remember now. Okay, but I didn't connect with the hook either. Which, again, this isn't from a writing perspective. It's from a audience perspective. Like, when your inciting incident happens, like, let it hit the audience so hard that they must turn over to read the next page. Which, I'm gonna just have to look at it real quick, y'all, and see, because like my thought, it's not coming back to me, and I'm just like, I want to know what I was talking about here. What's his power level? That is not a question for me. Like, that's something Josie needs to answer for us. Josie, what's his power level? Like, is he a reality manipulating celestial creature type thing that can do anything? Like, does he have like an infinity next to his power? Okay. So, is this where, like, okay, where is it? Oh yeah, so he's trying to figure out, like, oh, did I kill someone? Did I do this? So this is why I think this hook doesn't work. And let me go back to the slide now. Play from current slide. Yeah. So this is why this hook didn't work to me. I didn't understand why he couldn't have killed somebody. And I know, again, that sounds bad, but from my perspective, I don't know this character. From the audience perspective, I don't know this character, so like him just telling me that he's not capable of killing someone, I'm like, dude, you can't even remember. So what do you mean? Like, he's untrustworthy. So he's already told me that he's untrustworthy, and so now I'm just like, well, I can't trust what you said. Like, how you know you didn't kill somebody? You can't even remember if you did. So I don't think that was necessarily the best hook. Now, episode 4, I think, is a banger of a hook. So I think that was really good. Oh, yeah, definitely. So, Josie, we're waiting for you to tell us the power level. Yep. So let's move on to the next part. We got a Q&A. Okay, Josie, so you've got 10 minutes to ask us any questions you would like. And I mean, you could ask me personal questions if you want. Whatever you're down for. or if you guys had thoughts on the series. Not necessarily critiques, but maybe even things that you liked about the story so far. Leave them in the chat. I'm sure Josie would love some encouragement or whatever you can say that could boost her up, raise her up. You know, we want to elevate people here. Josie did volunteer for us to like basically rip her comic apart, so that's one thing. So we could at least show her some appreciation. So throw up some hearts emojis in the chat, throw up some sparkles, whatever. Let's see. And so I'm looking at your sheet that I had you fill out, and you said aside from the art, I need to have a better understanding on how to make a good story that doesn't sound so forced. So I wouldn't worry about story being forced, to be honest. Like, you force it. Sometimes forcing a story can be good. It just all depends on the way it's written. Like, I think I understand what you mean there. Or too shallow. So shallow, I think you're referring to like the intellectualness is definitely intellectual, and I definitely think it has like deeper themes and meanings. Like, there are no small concepts in your story, in my opinion. So I think it's doing a great job on having some real depth through it. Like, people who read it will sit there and think about it. Like, I thought about it afterwards and I didn't understand what was going on. Or too obvious. Definitely not too obvious. Like, again, I think it needs a little bit more exposition. Or making a scene that might become a wasted opportunity or ruin their entire arc. The only thing I'd say is just make sure your scenes are clear. Just give the audience, since you want it to have more of a mystery feel to it, I think Lovecraft and Poe, like, I know Poe for sure, like, you were basically trying to figure out things throughout the whole story. So I know that you're trying to, I shouldn't say I know, I'm assuming you're trying to go for more of a mystery vibe. And you're trying to make the audience think, make them come to their own conclusions so that they can, you know, try and guess what's ahead. So for that, completely fine. Just make sure to give the audience enough information. Enough so that the scene makes complete sense. That's all I'm asking for. Like, we can still have a ton of questions, but I want to leave it and be like, yep, I knew exactly what happened, but I want to know what's about to happen. Like, that's what you want your audience going away with. We understood, but we need more information. Which, I'm not the smartest person in the world, so, I mean, it could just be that. I could just be like y'all in the chat could probably be like, yeah, we understood everything that was happening 100%. And I'm just over here like, I didn't get it at all. I had to read it like 3 times. Yes, please make sure to sub. So, did you have any questions, or can we move forward? Like, I know I spent most of that time talking, but I want to make sure to answer your questions in the chat. I would say the one thing that I think you could work on as a little bit of a homework assignment is making your 1-sentence summary really clear and distinct. Make sure that you're hitting all of the main points so that if somebody was like, so if you were in a pitch meeting with like Webtoons and they were like, you've got 30 seconds, or no, you've got 15 seconds to tell us what your story's about, you could just hit it out of the park really quickly. So on your page, your 1-sentence summary says, the only people who can undo these horrors are the very people who authored them. So that's a little too vague for me. I think it would have, and I know you generally don't use names, but I would definitely have figured out a way to include Lovecraft and Poe in your sentence, because like that's your whole fan base. Like, who is Lovecraft? Not who is Lovecraft, but like people who see this sentence summary and they see Lovecraft or they see Edgar Allan Poe will instantly be like, oh yeah, I want to read that because I'm into that. You don't know how many series I have read that were complete trash because they had like Olympians in the description or in the title of the series, just because like I love mythology. So it is one of those where it's like, you know, do whatever you can to make your story sell. Like especially if you're trying to make it a career or something, take advantage of everything. Like if you're building off an already established fan base, don't shy away from it. Add it to your story. All right, so I don't see any questions from Josie, so I'm assuming that we're good. And we're gonna move on. All right, so lastly, of course, please thank Josie for allowing us to critique her series. We really appreciate you, and we really appreciate the effort you went through to craft your story and to let us review it. She is the creator of Ravens and Monsters on Webtoons. I really need to put up there if you're only Webtoons. I think you're only on Webtoons, but correct me in the chat if I'm wrong. But be sure to at least subscribe to her Webtoons and her Instagram, and then make sure to give all the episodes a heart. Like, I think that even if it doesn't help with the Webtoon algorithm, I think it helps creators to see that people are interested in their story. So make sure to follow them. I'm going to throw up you all's information on my Insta after the stream too, so that people can follow y'all easily. Like, they'll just have to go to my page and then, you know, click on your name. So let's move forward. Let's keep it going. So we finally hit Mitch's part of the stream. I'm sorry, I'm stretching. Like, let me get up and stretch for like 2 seconds, and then we'll move forward. Like, I sit down for work all day, so I'm like, I gotta get up and stretch for like 2 seconds before we move forward into our next story. Our next story. All right, so everybody knows Mitch apparently. So I'm a little intimidated, Mitch, to throw you up on this. But he is the creator of 100 Years Later, which unfortunately he told me that he is not working on anymore. But that's okay. That's okay. You are so welcome, Josie. If you ever have questions, always feel free to DM me on Instagram, and we can always talk writing stuff. Like, I really enjoy that. It's one of my favorite things to do. All right, back to Mitch. So he is the creator of 100 Years Later. Make sure to follow him at TheArtOfMitch on Insta. So, as always, before we move forward, we are going to read the first 3 episodes. So this is of 100 Years Later. Ugh. And Mitch, you're gonna have to help me with tear a new one. Okay, no, I'm not gonna be super critical on it, like slash it to pieces, but we're gonna do a little slashing. Like, it'll have some claw marks on it. But I did want to ask you, I wasn't sure how to pronounce the family's last name. Is it Slythen? Slythen? And then the country's name, is it, it's right here actually. Hybridia. Hybridia? I wasn't sure how to pronounce them. So let me know if I'm saying them completely wrong, or if you have like a little pronunciation thing, throw it in the chat for me. That would be helpful. All right, so let's look at the summary. In the industrial land of Hybridia, people that commit crimes against the crown are thrown out into the wasteland and must fight for their lives. Silas is banished to the wastelands for 100 years, thought to never return. 100 years later, Silas returns with vengeance and a mysterious new power. Updates every other Thursday. Thank you, Josie. I love that little squid emoji. It's my favorite emoji. All right, so we see that this story, I think it was going to be on a really like grand scale. So that's super exciting. I love grand scale stories. So let's just get right into it and see how the story develops. So we're just going to read the first 3 episodes. So I liked Silas. Like right off the bat, I love a character who questions the morality of the morality. Yeah, morality. I think that's the right word. Yeah, I love a character that questions like society's morality in a story, like figuring out what's right and wrong for yourself when you're growing up. I think is really important, and when you see injustice in a society, I think that a character with a good heart knows things that are wrong even when they're played to be the norm. So I thought that was a really nice something to include from when he first started in the story. Like we got a sense of what type of character he was to an extent, because I do think that there was other clues when he was a child that indicated some other things. But since I don't know more about the story, I don't want to get too far off into speculation. So then when he gets older, I basically like simp for characters with white hair. So I was just like, yup, white hair, I'm here for it. So I love the cool factor of the character. He gave me sort of like One Punch Man vibes or something like that. Like I felt, even though nothing even happened in the first 3 episodes, I really felt like he could do anything. And I don't know why that was. Maybe it was just his attitude, his like way things happened to him. He just was kind of like, it is what it is sort of thing. So totally really enjoyed that. Next, I thought you had a really strong plot. Like the story seemed to progress really well in the sense of like I could definitely tell how we got from point A to point B to point C. So there was nothing confusing to me during the creation of the story or as the story went along. Is that a question to me, Elias? Or are you asking other people? So next, the world building concept. So I like that there was a lot. Well, there wasn't a lot, but I did like that there was some really interesting world building devices introduced. So we had the collars, we had the barrier. Like I liked that that was all included. I liked the idea of the wastelands, even though we didn't get to see the wastelands. No. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Elias. So I'm gonna say no. Do I follow the Church of the Dark Knight Sparta? Yeah, I don't know what that is. I'm super basic, so probably not. All right, back to world building concepts. I liked so there was a clue that the earrings meant something. I like that. I like that the bands meant something. I like that. I like the wastelands. Oh, I know nothing about the Devil May Cry series. And I liked the monarchy that was included, and that there was like possibly a little bit of something surrounding the establishment of the families. Like it seemed very much like there was something going on with those, is it the Greybacks and the Slytherin family? So I liked that there was a lot of lore and world set up that made it seem like the story was bigger than just what was happening. So those were really awesome. I thought those were done extremely well. All right, so grabbing me a little drink of water, so bear with me, peeps. Alright, so there was no hook, technically. And what I mean by that is, like, there were hooks for sure, but there also kind of wasn't to me. And this is strictly from my opinion. So if we go back to episode 1, when Silas is cast out into the wasteland, like, I felt like, which I guess it could be a good hook in the sense that it makes the audience wonder what happened, but it's also not as strong to me as just leaving the episode right there. Like, I think it would have been a little stronger to, like, show a glimpse of what happened to him in the wilderness than to show him just returning. That's just my opinion, though. I liked it up until that point. I was just kind of like, this was resolved really quickly. Like, it was just like, you're cast out, and then he's back. It was too quick. Like, the audience didn't even get a chance to really digest that before the world is, like, revealed to us that it almost wasn't that important to the emotional build-up for the character. So, the reason I'm getting into this is when we get into the second point, we're creating an enticing beginning. And so that's really designed to capture the reader's interest. So my interest was definitely in the story when he got cast out. I'm like, ooh, things are getting juicy. And then right after that, it's like, oh, the juice is gone. So even if you wanted to push his return back by like an episode or two, I think that would have been a better build up. Super fast. Right, it was really quick. So then I just get into like a little bit more analysis on what a hook is. So the purpose of a hook is to grab attention and give your reader a reason to invest their time and energy into your writing, which, yeah, that's what it is, but there are different types of hooks. So you can have softer hooks, which I think that's kind of what that would be quantified as, not sure. What that would be associated with would be a softer hook. Like, it built up my interest, but it just wasn't as strong as leaving it open-ended. Like, that was a good cliffhanger. It was like a cliffhanger hook. Because it was kind of like, we've been left with this. This is what the next episode is going to feature. So, the thing that I will say is that that's brought out down here is it could be you're creating curiosity, something intriguing, or an unusual situation or an important question. Those can all be considered hooks to an extent. So if that's the route you want to take, just because you feel that your story, you have a better hook planned down the line, then that's completely fine. But for me, within the first 3 episodes, that scene was the most powerful. The other scenes weren't as powerful as his banishment. So I would have played that up and melted a little bit, like add a little flair onto a little spice. All right, so I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, it is what it is. No, I'm just kidding. You can totally ask me to elaborate and I will. So let's look at the next slide. And if you do have questions, Mitch, just throw them in the chat and I will do my best to answer them. So we kind of touched on this already in the chat. It was really, really fast. And what I mean by that is the first 3 episodes were fast. So we went from like him as a child, him as an adult, to his sister dying, to him getting a job, to him going to go execute his revenge on the king, which that was all really, really fast. And the reason I think that it was a little faster is I don't know this, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like you had an outline and you were going specifically by the bullet points in your outline without adding any bit of information in between. So it's almost like you had 2 loaves of bread and you forgot to put the meat and the lettuce and the onions and whatever else you put on a sandwich in the middle, in between. So when that happened, it kind of reads more to me like it's a summary of what's happening. So if we look at that first point, and I kind of go over like how to fix this, is it seemed like the story was doing too much telling. Like you were just telling us what was happening. So if we go back to the scene where his grandmother, I keep wanting to call her grandmother, where his sister dies, it really seems like you're just telling us what happened. It's like, oh, she did. And there was no emotion. Like even after she died, none of the characters kind of reacted to it. It was just like, oh, she did. And they moved on. Like it seemed like a plot point, and it was just like this was a plot point meant for emotional development, but it didn't even develop into that. And I found it strange, her reaction and her wording to Silas when she saw him. Like she said that this is a relative. She didn't say that this is my brother, which it's fine if she wanted to say that. Like, but it would have been nice to get a little bit of exposition as to why she decided to say that. Like she could have told Silas, I'm going to tell them you're a distant relative, instead of telling them you're our brother or you're my brother because of XYZ. Because it seemed like the character, she didn't even really care that he was back to an extent. Like she wasn't happy, she wasn't sad, she was just like indifferent about it, which she could have been. And if that was her response to it, that's also fine. It just seemed odd because I thought the scene was supposed to be emotional. So that also made it move really quickly. Because if we think back on that scene in particular, they kind of like greet, and she does her job by telling Trisha, like, oh, this is a relative, he's trustworthy. And then, like, that's her last sentence, and she's dead. And then, like, this relative that they haven't seen in years, he's just like, okay, cool. And he's, like, chilling in the lounge or whatever. And then Trisha comes in, and she's like, oh, it was natural causes. And, like, it seemed very, like, clinical and scientific to me. Which, if that's the character's personality, then, you know, just convey that more. Like, convey that in some internal dialogue. Like, him saying, I can't be emotional about this right now. I have to do this. Or, I can't show weakness right now. Like, have a little flashback scene of, like, someone telling him, if you want to survive out here, you can't show emotion. Like, because he was in the wastelands or whatever. So, like, that would help the audience to understand that, like, he's not just this evil robot. So, I'm going to stop building on that. So, next, when we're thinking about the scene, it allows the reader to feel as though they are in the story watching it unfold. So, this is where I'm talking about when it's moving too fast, adding in little things like glances or hand gestures or things like that. I know this is in the art realm, but that's more so also in the writing realm as well. Like, including when you're writing a novel, you could have someone saying something like, and she glanced longingly at her husband as he rode away for the final time. Like, that sentence in of itself is so much more powerful than just her just being like, and he rode away. Like, adding in some of those extra scenes of like movement or like emotional expressions reacting to something said will really help to make the scene feel more full. Hello, Mochiness. Everyone say hello to Mochi in the chat. We're so glad you could join. So looking at that last point, it says the events themselves should be shown so that the readers experience their importance. So when we have those scenes in there and we show that this is really important to the character, it helps the audience to know that this is important as well. Because if I think about everything that's kind of happened, the most important thing that stood out to me for Silas was making it to the king's birthday. That seemed to be the most important. Mitch, you are not emotionless. Do not fake these people. Like, we know you are just a big softie wanting, like, love and affection, like what humans don't. So let's move on to the next point. All right, so this is where we get into the emotional development of the scene and making sure that Happy Friday, Mochi. I love this energy that you're bringing. It's very nice. All right, so the emotional development of the characters. So as a reader, when you're reading a story, most of the time, a lot of things that we enjoy from an audience perspective is how it moves us, like how the story makes us feel. And so I thought of a few ways you could possibly add this into the story. So internal dialogue. So we touched on this earlier where I was saying like Silas could tell us how he's feeling in the scene, and then he could, shut down those emotions or whatever he wants to do so that the audience has a deeper insight into the character. And you can do that for other characters too. Like you could have done that for the father when his child lost their arm. That was another thing. Like that seemed to be really fast. Like his parents didn't follow them. Like I would have liked an explanation for that, because as a parent, well, I'm not a parent, let me back up. But in my opinion, from a parent's perspective, if like one child lost their arm, my other child's being taken away, it wasn't clear enough to me why I wouldn't try and like either help my child, be banished with my child, what I was trying to do, because they seemed like really honorable people. So it seemed weird that he was there alone. Like I could have even felt them begging in the background, like, hey, please don't do this, like, or banish me instead, leave him with my wife, like, or the wife being like, no, leave him with my husband, whatever needs to happen to make the scenes more impactful. Like, that would have also been good. Or if they felt that they couldn't say anything, we could have gotten that in some internal dialogue. So now we get to the part where it's like, don't report the emotions though. So don't literally just be like, the internal dialogue pops up and then he says like, oh, I'm so happy that this happened. That's just telling us what happened. We need to be shown his happiness. So obviously through a comic, you do that through the drawing, you show from the expression, but there are other ways that you can, report the emotion without just telling. Like he could say it in a roundabout way, like he could use an illustration, he could use an analogy, he could say it through dialogue, like he could be talking to another character to kind of bring out that information so that it's way more impactful. So this will lead you into specifically wanting to know what emotions to show. So this is also important when you're creating a scene. I think it's really important to understand the emotional intensity from all of your characters. Like, is my character happy in this scene? Are they sad in this scene? Are they fearful? Are they giddy? Are they grief-stricken? And that way, when you're writing it, the dialogue, you'll know like, oh, he's super excited. So everything's going to be more animated in his speech. Like, instead of saying like, oh, I'm so happy, he's going to say like, yay, I'm ready, I'm pumped, like, let's do this, fam. Like all of that stuff. Like those are things that'll indicate from a dialogue perspective to readers, like he's excited about this. And coupled with the art, it'll really be able to push the point home instead of it just being flat. So that last point, it was just overemphasizing that, like, don't report the emotions. That's pretty much it. Which emotions are a big part of the story. We gotta have the emotions, Mitch. And I was going to mention this, but you changed it on me, which irritated me a little bit. Was you were making a sports anime, manga, webtoon, and so like I had done a lot of research for sports manga. And I was just like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to tell him to help him with his new series. And then you're like, oh, no, I'm not doing that anymore. So shame on you. No, I'm kidding. But if you look at sports anime or sports manga, you'll notice that they rely extremely heavily on the emotions. Like, you could think about the appeal of a hockey anime, a volleyball anime, or, like a lesser sport. And I'm using that in air quotes because I'm just saying like a sport that's not as popular. Well, how are you going to get people invested into a story that they're not very familiar with? You want to appeal to their emotions. And so when you think about animes like Haikyuu, I can't say it. The one with like Sho, Hinata, and Kageyama, those characters, when you look at a story like that and you're thinking about the complexity of the sport and how like technical volleyball is and all of these positions and everything, they did not overwhelm you with that in the first episode. Like, they focused a lot on the character's dream and how he wants to be the greatest volleyball player ever, and how the fact that he's short and volleyball is meant for tall people. Like, he really focused, the writer really focused on making sure that the readers could understand from an emotional perspective or from a broader perspective what was happening. Like, people can relate to, being an underdog. They can relate to having a dream that's impossible. They can relate to, being young and giving something your all. Like, those are all very relatable or very logical things to follow. And so when you go from that perspective, regardless of whatever type of story you're making, the audience can connect emotionally to that, which is one of the biggest selling points of any story, the emotional connection to the audience. Because if the audience doesn't like it, they're not going to read it. All right, let's hit the next one. Okay. Now, this one might seem a little bit confusing because of what I talked about earlier, in sense of how, like, I thought you had a strong plot and everything made sense from A to B and all of that stuff. So when I say clear motivation / goal, like one of the two, what I'm talking about specifically is character motivation for Silas. So if we look at that first point, it says character motivation is the reason behind a character's behavior and actions in a given scene or throughout the story. So we didn't have enough information to understand most of Silas's actions, like why was he behaving the way he was? And so when we look at the summary, it's mentioned that it's a revenge story, right? Okay, I get that. Like, he wants to get revenge against the family who did his family wrong. The Greybacks? Can't remember their names. The current monarchs. But we didn't get enough information from his personality, for me at least, to understand that he was out for revenge. Like, he seems so chill and laid back about everything to me that he didn't necessarily seem like he even wanted revenge. And that could just be my interpretation. If y'all, if it's okay with Mitch, what did y'all think of Silas's motivations in the story? Were they clear? Could you understand them? Did you think that he seemed like he was out for revenge? Or what did you think about Silas in general? Like, Mitch, when you were writing this, maybe you can give us some insights too as to how it was going to develop into a revenge story, or was that like in the next episode that we didn't read? Which I read it, but even after I read it, I don't think it's necessarily clear to me that he was out for revenge. Like, it seemed like the revenge thing, I'm getting into spoilers. If you want to know what happened in the next episode, y'all need to read it. Just read it to support Mitch. Give him the hype to make his new story. More rage. Yeah, I think he could have shown a little bit more anger. Like, I did get the emote at the end that he was upset about what happened, got the mood lighting, all of that. I just think in the first two episodes, one, because episode 1 he was a child, episode 2 we're kind of getting introduced into him again, and he was just kind of like laid back. And then episode 3, he was still pretty chill up until the very end. So Taylor said it could be Monte Cristo vibes, like he is meant to come across as calm and laid back until we get to see him alone, maybe? Ooh, I like that. I do like the idea of that. I thought it was kind of like his personality is cold and distant because of his trauma of his banishment. Yes. So agree with that. Yeah, where he gets revenge is like unhinged. Oh, unhinged, lol. Yes, yes, yes. My impression of Silas was that he was hiding his intentions. So I'm liking all of these. So again, like I said, it could have just been me. So it seems like pretty much everybody kind of was in the area of he was repressing his emotions, which is fine. What? That's your favorite book, Mitch? That's awesome. Monte Cristo is his favorite book, y'all. So, for me, as someone who I guess this would have developed more, I just would have liked a little bit more of his intentions to have come across a little bit more clear. So we think about, we wouldn't have even known it was a revenge story unless you read the summary. So I don't think that the revenge came across. I think at the very end, if you're smart and connecting all of the dots, then you're just like, yup, he's doing it, folks. So I think, yeah, I think just like a little glimpse would have been cool. When he was alone, we could have gotten that emotion. So the second point, readers don't have to like or approve or share a character's motivation. We just need to believe it. So when I say that, I'm mostly just talking about don't just let his motivation be completely random and just appear all of a sudden to the audience. Make it hit us hard. Like whatever could have been conveyed, you could have even discussed, like when he came back, there could have been like a royal guard and he could have like balled up his fist. Like he could have narrowed his eyes at the palace, like all sorts of things you could have shown like he has disgust for the current royal family. I think that would have been dope. So then the last point, without credible motivations, your characters will read like strange puppets that you've dressed up in human clothing. I thought that was a fun little analogy. So we want to bring them to life and give them real, understandable reasons for doing what they do. So you already gave him a reason for wanting revenge. We got the arm cutting. We got the banishment, and not just any sort of banishment for 100 years. So basically he was like, you're gonna go out there and die. So I really liked, so we had all of the underlying reasons. So just making sure that it's credible and believable, bam, and then you just go forward from there. So I think just adding in that little bit would have helped. So for you, all of this stuff is like interly connected, at least in my opinion. So when you're going back to, I don't know if you're going to come back to this story. I would just say like all of these are connected almost in a chain, in my opinion. So if you fix one, you'll need to fix the other and keep building on that. So the clear motivation to me is the weakest, and that's why it's here last, just because I think as people read more, that motivation would have developed more clearly. So we've made it to Q&A time. So Mitch, feel free to ask any questions. You've got 10 minutes, and I've started the timer. All right, and then looking at your sheet, it says, especially the first chapter and how it might be able to hook the readers more. How, if anything, okay, let me answer that first before going on to the second part while you're typing your question. So thinking about this, I thought it would have been nice to show, like, in the first episode, cutting it off where he's banished, and then having him facing something suspenseful or strong or scary out in the distance. Like, you gave us a little glimpse of that there was some sort of creatures out there. I would have liked another glimpse of that, more clear, like a wolf or like a dragon or something, and like him shivering and like getting a scene of seeing like a grand scale monster looming over him. That would have been really cool. And then I think for episode 2, if this was my story, I would have given everybody just like a little glimpse of what it was like in the wasteland. Like him running, him trying to escape some sort of like daring, strange situation. And then I would have ended episode 2 with like him on the edge of something dramatic happening. And then I would have opened up episode 3 with the flash forward. Like, would have had some sort of crazy obstacle for him to overcome in the wastelands. He would have realized like, oh, I can do this. But then like there would have been some sort of interesting cliffhanger to happen that would make readers be like, ooh, what's going to happen here in the wasteland? And then when they open episode 3, it would have been, you know, him returning 100 years later. And I think that would have worked for if I was writing it. So you don't have to do any of this, but I think I would have liked that just a little more, just to include, like, let the audience see the stakes of what it was like in the wasteland so that they're invested in Silas as a character more. I think what you did is fine. Like, I was pretty invested in Silas. He was like one of the points that I thought was amazing. So he was my favorite point of the whole series. I could be a little biased because, you know, I like the character, but I thought he was written really well. So then we look at your next question. You said, how, if anything is unclear or possibly confusing, better story structure. So the only thing for unclear, I would say, is the emotions, which we touched on. Nothing was necessarily confusing. I thought everything was pretty easy to follow. And then structure advice. So the only thing I would say is adding in those pieces in between the sandwich. So we've got our bread pieces, but just adding in some more fluff in there. Like even like 1 or 2 panels of just like a little bit of that emotional fluff, I think would have really elevated it up. And that's pretty much it. I also liked your little blurb. In your 1-sentence summary, you said the revenge of a man wronged. I would take this up like a little bit because the revenge of a man wronged is just like too generic. Like add in something else to really help us to be invested in the story. Like either add in some emotional weight or some plot weight or concept weight. And what I mean by that is like you could say a man whose entire family is dead, because like his I'm assuming his mom, his dad, and his sister, they're all dead. You could say a man whose entire family was murdered. Not murdered, they weren't murdered. A man who, I don't know, like I was trying to do this off the cuff, but like it's not working. But pretty much I would just add in just a little bit more. And the reason I bring up the 1-sentence summaries is because I feel like if you can pitch your story to me in 1 sentence, then that means that you've got it down, that you've got your concept down at the very least, and that whatever that 1 sentence is needs to be able to intrigue me beyond the 1 sentence. So, I just think that's a good rule of thumb to have if you're ever trying to like convince other people to read your series or trying to convince people to be interested in your series. Having something like that down is great. So did you have any questions, Mitch? Like, I feel like I've gone through the whole sheet. Like, where we at, brother? What we got? Or, and also if y'all in the chat have, you know, anything amazing to say to Mitch about his story, if you want to give him heart emojis, the salsa, not salsa, the dancing girl emoji, the sparkle emoji, like show him some love in the chat. Like let him know that you guys appreciate him offering up his story onto the chopping block. And yes, Mitch, I agree. Show more fear. Fear is always an important thing to convey in a story. Like, if I feel afraid for your character, then, and I'm saying I as in the audience, if the audience feels afraid for your character, I think you're doing a great job. Like, if I am worried about my main character dying, you're doing a great job. Because we know often main characters don't die. So I want that. I want the readability. I want the emotional connection there. How was the readability? Like, too text heavy. So let me pull up the story real quick. We're going to end the slideshow. And then we can look at a little bit of the readability. My mind wasn't working just then. So I think episode 2 is a good place to go. So episode 1 seemed pretty formal to me, just in the sense of the way the dialogue was written. But I think that's because they were royal. Like, they were royal characters, so they would speak in a more formal way. So, no, let's... Okay, so like here, for example, he's like, check out how many earrings he has. The boss would be mad if we messed with him. So I feel like in a lot of your dialogue, you're telling the audience a lot of things. Like, it doesn't seem like a conversation, which is fine, to be honest. Like, I don't necessarily think anything's wrong with how this is put or how this is said. It just seems like you're telling me what's up, like why they're not messing with him, which is literally part of the scene. So that's the only thing I would say to be careful of, because then right after you do that, you have like casual dialogue where he's like, I'll let you get away with this for now, retiree. Like, it's casual. So I would just say be careful with when you're delivering your exposition lines, that they don't necessarily read like exposition. Make sure that they sound like something that character would say. And sometimes, you can't get away with how the line comes across. It just is what it is. Like, let's see. So she's like, I could have handled that myself. I didn't need the help of another banished. And then he responds, right, I'm actually a, man, I forgot how to say this, Slythan that got banished a while back. Like, he doesn't even acknowledge what she said, which could be a part of his personality. But he just seemed to kind of just like, she said this, and then he ignores it and says what he wants to say. And he's like, is anyone else here? And then she just kind of gives him the information, even though it's revealed later that she doesn't trust the banished and that she doesn't want to talk to them. And then we get this little thought bubble, but like, because of the way she was set up to me, I feel like she wouldn't have told him nothing. Like, why is she giving him all this information other than to reveal exposition? So I guess it just depends. Like, what do you, like, why is the dialogue here? So it can be chunky, but just make sure it flows with the conversation. Like, it doesn't always have to be perfect. It just needs to make sense logically, and it does make sense. And I feel like she would say this possibly afterwards. Yeah, they are super straight to the point. It's just like, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay, you said what you needed to say. Now let me say the importance of what needs to be said. Which is, again, fine. It's just, do you want your dialogue to come across that way? And then another scene. Oh, wait. I guess it's in episode 3. I was like, with the grandma. With the sister. Oh, here it is. She's like, Silas, you're back. It's been 100 years right on the dot. Like, this seemed weird to me when I first read it. As I was reading, I was just like, why is she keeping up with this, like, so specifically? And I mean, I get it, like, it's her brother, he got banished on that day, she probably would remember it. It just seemed like an odd thing to say. Like, why would she say that? I feel like she probably would have just been like, I'm so glad you've returned. I can't believe it's been 100 years. I've missed you so much. Like, I feel like she would have said that over this. And then when we get back into her scenes, he's like, I'm surprised you recognize me considering my young appearance. Like, this also seemed like exposition to me, where he was just kind of like, I'm young and you're old. And she was like, of course I would recognize you. Like, I feel like I probably, if it was me writing this, I would have had her say, her to bring up his age. Like, I think she would have kind of like broached the topic instead of him. This is, again, just my opinion. Like, what you have here is fine. It just seems like an odd response, like an odd thing to say. I'm surprised you recognize me. Like, this is one, if you haven't really changed that much, and you don't look like a grandpa, like, I feel like it should be obvious for her to recognize him. Like, he shouldn't be surprised that she recognized him. Like, he should be surprised about how she looks, if anything. Like, he should have came in this room and been like, is that you, Sandra? Like, is that you? You look like you're 1,000 years old. Like, you've got one foot in the grave. And so I felt like the dialogue there a little weird. And then she's like, but just what happened to you in the wasteland? This also seemed odd to me. It seemed like exposition. I'm like, would she really care? I feel like she probably would have been like, I'm just so happy you've made it back. I just want to let you know I love you. And we don't have to talk about anything that you don't want to talk about right now. And like, you know, whatever. Like, this all seemed very exposition-y. All right, I think I've said enough on that. Like, I got on a little tangent for a moment. Sorry, peeps. So back to our current slide. Were there any more questions? Let's see. Yeah, and I mean, it does make sense from, you know, in my opinion, but it doesn't mean what you have there is wrong. So you just want to, because some characters literally are just exposition. Like, they're literally there to just tell the audience something, but you can do it in a sneaky way. Like, if you're revealing some exposition, just, you know, liven it up in the conversation. Drop little sprinkles of it so that the audience isn't like, huh, what? Both feet, actually. All right, I think like we went well over the 10 minutes, but I mean, most of that was just me talking. So, Mitch, if you have any more questions, we are all ears. We'll give you another moment. And of course, all of y'all, please support Mitch. Give him all of the love in the world. He has been so awesome to allow us to critique his series. He's the creator of 100 Years Later, and he has another series that'll be coming out soon, which, does it have a name yet, Mitch? I'll give it a little shout out here. And also be sure to follow him on Instagram, TheArtOfMitch. So I don't think we've got any more questions, so we'll move forward. All right, so announcement to all of you wonderful people here. We are doing our 4th writing critique stream. It will be in February. So I know some of y'all are probably like, that's so far away, etc. Well, these things take time for me to do, and I try to put in a lot of thought into the stories so that the creators who offer their series up have something to build upon. Like, this whole writing critique stream is for creators to take away something useful to help build up their story. Like, I don't want to just get up here and tear it to pieces or like just offer negative critique of it. I want creators to be able to have something to build upon. So if you want a critique like that, or if you're interested in trying to improve your, even if you're just trying to improve your writing, like you could already have a story established, you can let us know or tell us what we're working on, and we can try and help you improve that or help you with your story in general. So it's going to be February the 25th, 2022, which is crazy. All right, so Mitch said that his next series is The Amazing Anton, and the first chapter will be out tomorrow, maybe? That's exciting, Mitch. Congratulations on releasing your second series, so everybody be on the lookout for that. Should they follow you on Instagram or Twitter? Are you going to update them on that, or are you going to just throw it up on Webtoons and hope people sees it? Like, where should people follow you so that they can get the latest updates? Oh, and speaking of the fourth writing critique stream, be sure to look in the description, and there will be a link down there where it'll say something along the lines of webcomic submissions. Click on that and fill out the form to be included in this. All right, we've entered the Ask Me Anything. So you can ask it, but that doesn't mean that we will have to answer it. So this is open to everyone. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. Or if you just want to tell me something, that's also fine. Like, if you just want to be like, Apollo, you're the worst. Like, I mean, I'm cool with that. Whatever you guys want to say. Or if you have anything you want to say. If not, we will just keep on moving. I'm very excited for The Amazing Anton, though. Like, I saw you working on it on one of your streams, and I'm just ready for it. I'm hyped. Okay, so he said follow him on Insta for the update. So if you're not following him, that's TheArtOfMitch on Instagram. All right, there are no questions. One of these days, I'm going to get a question in this section. All right, we are hitting shout outs. So this is, how's my day? My day was decent. All right, I'll go back for a second since I did. No, we went forward. I'll go back for a second since I did get a question. How was my day? It was busy. I worked all the way up until about 6 o'clock. I then had some dinner beforehand, and so that helped me get through this. Like, I always take a nap after work, but I was just like, oh, I cannot take a 30-minute nap because then I will be awful during the stream. Like not entertaining, not able to like form any sort of coherent thoughts, which, to be honest, the thoughts tonight were not super coherent, but one day they will be. Tell us about your favorite Grey's character. I don't have a favorite character off of Grey's Anatomy. I hate every character. They're all terrible. But if I had to pick one, I think I would pick Mark. Because, I don't know. He's the least annoying, I think, out of all the characters. Maybe. All right, Mitch says, thanks for this, Apollo. I will use all the information in my comics in the future. Yes, that's what I like to hear. Use all of the information, please. That is so hype. All right, shout outs. So I always just pick random creators who are also following us on Instagram, people who have their series up, and I just want to try and hype them up and make sure that y'all check out all of these lovely people. Like, so many of them have been super supportive to me. And so I just thought, hey, let me try and give back. So every stream, I'm just going to keep picking out random people. And if you want to be one of the people I pick, I guess a way you could do that is just like DM me or leave a comment on this. And then I'll go back and check the comments and be like, yeah, you. I will definitely add you to the shout out section. So here's just a few of the people that I thought could use some love in particular. And Hobbyish is always here on all of the streams. Like, if you don't know Jess, like, what are you doing with your life? Like, she has been such a big support, and I just appreciate you, Jess, so much. Thank you. Also, Backfire is so nice. Like, I've gotten a chance to talk to that creator a few times, and they have just been so awesome. And all of y'all know Q Nikki, obviously, so make sure to check out her series. She's another YouTuber, so you can support her on YouTube as well by subscribing to her, and I've linked everyone's comic in the description. So after this stream is over, just go and check that out. Check out one of these awesome series. Man, I picked a lot of Supernatural. I did not pay that any attention. And yes, Jess, it's you. All right, and lastly, a huge thank you to our patrons. And I just want to let y'all know we are moving forward with really starting some really cool things on Patreon. So if you want to support us there, that would be awesome. We're going to start doing Patreon exclusive streams every month where we specifically pick out a skill to learn. So if everyone on Patreon decides, hey, we want to learn how to draw hands, we'll do a stream just for patrons where we focus on like trying to learn how to improve our drawings of hands. You know, we could do anything. Like if we want to learn how to draw certain elements, we could do that. Like the sky is the limit for these things. And, if you want to support us and get some additional education type stuff, then you're free to join that. And the Patreon streams are available to all tiers, and our lowest tier is $1. So I had to throw in a little shield there just because, like, that's the value of this. That's FF looking. Does that mean Final Fantasy? I'm not sure what that means. So, this character is one of my originals. She was my mascot for my old business that I had online, and so I was like, oh, we'll just use her for now until we get the designs done for Apollo, Poseidon, and Blue. All right, and specific thank you to Diana and Taylor who are already supporting us. You guys are amazing. So, thank you so much for the support, peeps. Thank you so much. Elias, I could totally see a little bit of the Final Fantasy inspiration now that you mention it. I can't think of the character. Is that Shiva? Maybe Shiva? Maybe? I'm trying to think of characters that have, like, long hair. I don't know what Heidelin looks like, so maybe. Anyway, thank you so much, guys, for coming to the stream. I really appreciate everything, and I look forward to catching y'all in the next stream. So without further ado, be sure to follow us on Instagram, Patreon, Coffee, or Twitter. And if you want to talk to me specifically, you can always DM me on Instagram. I am always around to chat. So with that, I will catch you guys in the next video.